We all have gut feelings where our system is breaking. Whether it is a bottleneck in procurement or delay in shipping or having more or less resources in our business processes, the challenge is gut feeling does not scale. How system data can be transformed into more living and breathing information that can be used by the business is the objective of our today's webinar. Hi, I'm Amit. I'm a principal team at Q3edge, and we are exclusively working in the business process management with an objective how to manage business through processes. In the same series, we are going to discuss about the process mining, how it is helping an organization for managing business through processes. We are going to use and discuss about ARIS process mining. Today in this webinar, we are going to discuss how system data can be transformed into the more living and breathing business decisions, the information that can help an organization to find out where are the root causes, where they require more focus. For this, I am pleased to invite Mr. Mohammed Shoaib Osmani. Mr. Mohammed Shoaib Osmani is a senior solution architect who is working with ARIS and leading the projects in Middle East as well as in Asia. I met Shoaib during my last visit in Zytex, where we discussed about the different business cases, and it was so impressive to see the kind of the value which has been generated by ARIS process mining. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to invite Shoaib and discuss with him his experience, his global experience on process mining, the roadmap of the process mining. Before we start, the very first thing that we are going to discuss about is a very basic understanding about process mining. Let's understand what is process mining from Shoaib. Hi Shoaib, it's a pleasure to meet you again after Zytex. Good. I still remember I discussed with few of my professional colleagues as well as with few of my clients the value of the process mining, and I discussed about some of the business cases that you shared with us during the Zytex. I thought it's a great opportunity for everyone to learn and understand from you. You have a very rich experience in process mining. You are working with the global customers. So we thought let's have this session and understand from you, starting from the scratch, what is process mining to how the process mining is going to give a value to the organization.
So, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shoaib. Let's start with a very basic question, Shoaib. We have seen the industry is evolving a lot, and now it is talking a lot in terms of digital transformation, business transformation, and ARIS has been known as a leader for the process mapping. So where do you see the process mining is now fitting in? Is it a new word, a buzzword of business intelligence, or it is way beyond?
Sure. So let me actually take ourselves a few years back when we were actually talking about this topic, right? So yes, we as ARIS have been around in the market for 30 plus years. We've been doing a lot of process mapping along with pioneering partners like yourselves as well, who have an established name in the space of BPM. But the practice in itself, especially with regards to process mining, has actually been around since at least 2001. That is at least when ARIS came up with the first commercial tool for process mining. It used to be called the Process Performance Manager. So that is what the practice was actually known as earlier as well. It was more around tracking the performance of the processes, measuring the core KPIs around it. The practice has been around for a while, but yes, since 2021, ever since analysts like Gartner and Forrester have started recognizing this technology as a core element of any digital transformation initiative, that's when the buzzword has sort of really picked up and the hype has picked up as well. And now, with the cloud first approach for a lot of organizations, it's sort of becoming easier for organizations to have their existing landscape sort of, connect to tools like process mining and then get their insights through that. So that's pretty much how we've seen it evolve over the years.
Excellent. I'm following ARIS since 2009. Since then, I'm seeing ARIS has always been in the top quadrant of the Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Amazing. I heard about the ARIS process performance earlier. Yes, and it's great. So it's an evolution of the ARIS process performance.
Precisely, that's pretty much what we've done. So of course, since the whole practice of process mining and process mining as a technology has now evolved with the modern UIs, with the modern technologies being used, we've sort of evolved the product as well and rebranded it to something called ARIS Process Mining. So it's no more called ARIS Process Performance Manager, and that's pretty much where we stand today. And we're also trying to integrated tighter into the whole process documentation repository, right, to provide one end-to-end process intelligence platform.
Perfect. So, Shoaib, how would you like to take us through this process mining journey from the concept to the business case? Do you have any business case that we can discuss today? The problem that you solved, how did you solve that particular problem? What was the situation? What is the value generated to the organization?
Sure, I'd love to do that. We can actually go through a use case today as well for process mining. But before I actually step into that, I'd like to just shed some light on the basics around process mining first. We may have some audience members who might be new to the concept, and I just want to circle back to a very important point you brought up initially, which was whether process mining can be considered as business intelligence as well, right? Whether it falls within the same umbrella or not. So if the time allows, I'd like to just take the audience through a couple of slides to set the concept right, and then we can go through a use case as well.
That's awesome, Shoaib. So you have prepared even the slides for this webinar. That's really great. The floor is all yours. Let us take us through to this journey of process mining. And wherever there would be any question, me or the audience would uh, raise their hand. We will discuss with you. Yeah.
So I'll just take the audience through a couple of more conceptual points around how organizations can actually unlock process transparency, because primarily that is what process mining is here to do for organizations, give that end-to-end visibility into the processes, more from an operational reality perspective as well. Um, but like I mentioned earlier, I just want to circle back to the whole concept of whether it's the same thing as business intelligence, right? And before we talk about that, let's talk about the real state of a lot of organizations, large scale organizations today, where they have processes which are running, but there's no real visibility into the performance of these processes. They may be being executed in multiple systems, but there's no tracking of what's really going on, how the processes are actually performing. And to put that a little bit into the context of flying a plane as well, that's pretty much similar to flying blind without a cockpit, without any instruments in your plane. You're in a functional plane, you're heading somewhere, but you're not sure how long it's going to take to get there, any issues that you may face on the way, what your fuel gauge is looking like. Put that into business context, you're not sure where your revenue is leaking or what path of the process is basically incurring the most amount of costs. Now, if we transition that into business intelligence, think of having a cockpit on the plane. So you can see your speed, your altitude, your fuel levels. You have an idea of some level of performance on that process. But then what's lacking in business intelligence, or how we can, let's say, transition that into something a bit more granular, is there are specific parts or tools in the plane, like the flight recorder black box or something called the QAR, which is a quick access recorder, which actually tracks the route that the flight is taking, the different paths that it's taking. And even in cases of accidents, the recordings from these flight recorders are actually used to investigate any incidents or issues that have been caused on the flight as well. And that is pretty much that for me that fits right into the context of process intelligence, right? With business intelligence, you get high level dashboards, you get some KPIs and metrics that you can measure, but process mining and process intelligence is what really helps you understand why those KPIs are the way that they are, why those numbers are being shown on your dashboards, what are the different paths and deviations behind this. So I'll use that as the starting point into what process mining really is, just to put that into context. Um, and so for the audience here today who are completely new to the concept of process mining, to sum it up in very simple terms, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of business processes are being executed on a lot of systems today. We're living in a digital era. There are ERP systems, CRM systems, workflow management systems as well. Um, but more often than not, organizations don't really have the visibility between what was originally designed in the Visio diagrams, in the BPMN diagrams, versus what is actually being executed in these systems. So with process mining, we help organizations to tap into these systems, into the event logs, reconstruct the process flow, discover the process. We call this the reverse engineering of the process. And then with that, we can also check whether the discovered process is actually conformant with what was originally designed. And using that analysis, we come up with the insights that can actually derive business value and business outcomes for organizations. Um, I'll just put that a little bit more into context visually, how that looks. So let's say, for example, you've got an order management process and you've got multiple elements of that process being run on multiple systems. What process mining really works like is we extract that data in bits and pieces, the order data, how that order gets fulfilled, what are the shipping details for that order, how is the invoicing and billing being done. All of that data is collected from the event logs. And the most important data elements of process mining are actually the unique identifiers. So if it's an order management case, the customer order number or the customer number, if you want to sort it out by customers. These are some of the unique IDs that actually help consolidate a set of activities into one instance of a process. So we, of course, use process mining to do that. And with that, we also sort these activities out by timestamps. So that helps us put these activities into chronological order. And that is precisely how the process gets discovered from the data logs of these systems. So I hope I'm not getting too technical for the audience over here, but I just wanted to set the context right, that this is how it's done, because we often get a lot of questions around, how do we know that this analysis is accurate? How do we know that process mining is actually showing us the real process work that's being done? So again, this is not something that's being manually fed into the system. This is coming in from your operational systems. Now that we've understood how process mining really works, how we can gather all of that data, something that's very important to understand is how can organizations actually derive measurable business outcomes from this practice, right? Is it just a tool that helps us connect to systems, gather logs, see what the process looks like? No, it doesn't end there. So as you see on your screens as well, those are, let's say, the first two phases of setting up a process mining practice. But following that is where you actually derive the true value of the practice, where you can identify root causes and understand how you can improve them. And as a continuous improvement practice, which is, of course, a very common terminology that is used within the BPM space as well for operational efficiency, you get to track and monitor the core KPIs and metrics of the processes. Um, and with that, you eventually end up achieving business outcomes where you can reduce the cycle time of your processes, you can reduce the operational costs, identify automation opportunities as well. That is also a topic we would like to touch today at some point, where um, identifying automation opportunities should not just stem from a mandate coming in from a hyped up technology or a trending technology. It needs to have the right process foundation to ensure you're automating the right processes as well. So this is more of a, let's say, strategic or high level business outcome perspective. Let's actually move towards a real use case, right? Where we can talk about the order management, especially in the retail space. Um, the industry has evolved severely over the past few years. There's a lot of e-commerce companies showing up. There's a lot of manufacturers that actually need to procure a lot of supplies for manufacturing as well. So it spans across multiple industries. So order management from a business process management perspective becomes a very critical process that actually impacts a lot of organizations in a strategic manner. And that is actually something that is very important to understand when we're looking to identify the right candidates for process mining. Um, Usually how we go about it with a lot of organizations is we firstly understand what are the value drivers within the organization that can have either an impact on their financial cash flow, on their net promoter score within the customers, on how well they're utilizing the resources, their full-time employees in the organization, or purely from a profit and loss perspective as well, how certain value drivers can actually impact the organization from a strategic perspective. And keeping that in mind, we then understand what are the objectives of an organization, what are they really looking to achieve. Do they want to minimize their revenue leakage? Would an organization want to increase their customer satisfaction or their productivity levels, so on and so forth? So when we think about it from this perspective, it's easier to set the context right for a process mining practice. You're not just tapping into data and then sort of reaching a dead end where you're slightly clueless about what impact we need to measure from the process mining practice. You actually have a clear picture of, within the context of order management, we want to understand what are the most critical pain points. So in the use case that we're going to see today, for example, in order management, most commonly organizations lose a lot of revenue when orders are unbilled or unshipped, or they lose a lot of customer trust when the deliveries are late, or they also have a lot of trapped order value sitting in open orders where orders are actually accepted, but the customers are not getting any updates from the suppliers where they've placed the order, or they're not really getting any shipment or delivery around that order as well. And with these pain points or challenges around order management, there are specific KPIs and metrics that need to be measured to understand how that's financially impacting the organization and how it's also working as a process. So we will now move to a demo of seeing how order management, let's say, value can be unlocked using process mining. So just bear with me for a second while I switch to the demo. All right, so now we've moved to a live process mining environment of ARIS. And what we'll actually be going through today is actually a use case that we had worked on for a retail company who actually had an idea around the challenges that they're facing within order management, but they were really unsure about how they can drill down into the details of how they can prioritize fixing certain elements of this particular process, right? So that they knew that there are a lot of open orders in the organization. They sort of had an idea about the monetary value of orders that could be trapped in as well, but they were really unclear about what could be causing these issues. And in a large scale retail organization, as you can see over here, in process mining itself, we had actually looked into 296,000 cases or orders for that organization. So at such a large scale, it sort of becomes challenging to really narrow down and understand where we can unlock most value using process mining, right? And that is what the organization really needed help with. They could run hundreds of workshops internally. They could scram through raw data as well, but then they wouldn't be able to come up with the required insights to really prioritize what needs to be fixed as an immediate step to actually start unlocking some financial value or business value from their order management process as well. So what we ended up doing for them was pretty much creating this uh, control tower using process mining, where they get a direct visibility into the performance of their order management process. And as you see, since we had four main pain points highlighted from their end, where we've got open orders, you can see the trapped value of the orders as well. So they had around $12 million of open orders within the organization over the course of a few weeks. Similarly, for unshipped orders, they had a value of around $20.7 million of unshipped orders sitting within the organization. Um, Similarly, for unbilled orders, it was around 16.9 million. and quite a high amount for late deliveries as well. And of course, we help them come up with an analysis to at least see how this distributes across their order management practice and what the total let's say trapped value is of these orders. Now let's, for example, drill into one of the issues that they were facing, right, which would be of open orders. So if we start investigating this issue, we can start seeing um, the total value is over here as well, and we can see the total number of cases or the total number of orders that are actually open. And we also see a backlog of days. So this is something that's very critical. How long do these orders remain open for? Because the longer an open order sits, the more you're losing out on revenue potential, the more you're losing out on customer trust as well. And most importantly, so like I mentioned earlier, they really needed help in understanding how they can narrow down and prioritize from these 12,000 cases as well. Which cases can they really focus on to get immediate impact and value? So we ended up coming up with an analysis where your open orders would be at risk as well, which would mean that these open orders have even passed the planned shipment date, and even the grace period for the shipment date. Usually, for customers, we set up organizations set up a shipment date and a grace period of a couple of days that there might be delays. But if the order remains open, it's not being shipped or billed either, and you're at a high risk of losing that customer and a lot of potential order value as well. So let's filter out the analysis based on that. So I'll select the customers which are actually at risk or the orders which are actually at risk. So we've sort of narrowed it down to a value of 3 million. And this actually has the highest, let's say, backlog age as well. As we can see, majority of these cases out of these 3,200 orders, we have almost around 1,300 orders which are actually taking more than 15 days of remaining open. So let's understand what's really causing this. We can switch to a root cause analysis in process mining based on all the data that was collected from the ERP systems, which is running this order management process. We can actually come up with a root cause analysis to see if there are any instances or cases of the process where it's crossing a particular threshold, where let's say the open order is taking more than 10 days, if the order value is more than 20,000, 30,000, we can define these symptoms in process mining, and it gives us results of the root causes. So over here, for example, we can see the most common root causes are actually a credit block or a delivery block on the order, which basically implies the fact that before an organization actually ships out an order or creates a delivery note, they actually check whether there's any credit risk for this customer. Maybe they have older pending orders, invoices which have not been paid, so on and so forth. And usually that needs a manual unlock. So someone from finance needs to review that and release that credit block. Similarly, for same applies for the delivery block as well. So let's now focus on these two most common root causes and understand what is the value that the organization can actually unlock. So if they only focus on these two root causes, the organization could actually unlock $2.4 million of unrealized value. Now let's see how can we rally that information within the organization. We actually can come up with a detailed view of each order number linked to the customer number as well, understanding what type of an order it was. We've got the root cause, let's say, filtered out over here as well. We can see the filters on the top, and we can see the order value as well. If we'd like, we could, of course, arrange this in a, let's say, descending order to understand the highest order, the highest value order that has been locked, or from an age perspective as well, we can filter it out. So if it's been really long since an order has been opened, we know this is an order we need to prioritize to fix. Now that is more from an operational resolution perspective, right? These details can be exported, sent to the line managers, to finance, to ensure listen, these are the priorities, priority orders. We need to start releasing these immediately so that we can unlock this order value of 2.4 million and we don't lose out on this revenue. But of course, you following this, organizations can also come up with improvement initiatives, which is more, let's say, process informants oriented. So for example, if there is a credit block, an organization may look into automating credit blocks as well. So nowadays, organizations are even creating release order agents, or release block agents, where an agent can actually be trained with the right financial rules, to see the order value, to do the customer profiling, and if everything is good, they can actually unlock the order, and then it goes through to processing. That can actually save on a lot of time, and you won't have open orders sitting for 24 plus days within an organization. So this is, for example, one, let's say, pain point that we help organizations target. We did similar analysis for unshipped orders as well. I'll just quickly take the audience through that also. So over here, for example, we've got an order value of 20.7 million, where the orders have not been shipped. They've been paid for, they've been placed, but the billing has not really happened. So the revenue is not being recognized either. So again, you can focus on the time, or the backlog distribution over here to ensure that the orders are shipped on time. You can see which ones are actually causing the most delay, or which product categories are actually contributing the most to this pain point. So you could filter that out over here as well. And now we've got a narrowed down approach to see the most, let's say that the highest unshipped age of 36.6 days on average, and the highest order value, which is around 15.8 million. Drill down, and we can, of course, then move into the root cause analysis of that, understand what the issues are. So, for example, over here, we've got missing route data. So we could again filter that out, see this is the value that can be unlocked, go into the details, and again start working on this process improvement initiative from here. And of course, in terms of missing um, routing data, again, an improvement action could be to implement automated data checks within your ERP systems to ensure that you can prevent these issues before they occur itself. So that's more of a preventative measure that can be taken. So this is pretty much the end result of the analysis that takes place. But when we're talking about process mining, um, all the data behind this intelligence that's coming our way, that the organization can use to work on improvement initiatives, it actually stems from the discovery of the process. And this is what it looks like in process mining. Let me just get rid of all of these filters, and we see the whole order from a holistic perspective. So now we're not drilling down into any specific pain point or any filtration of the data. We're just seeing how this process actually flows. And this is based on the data coming in from the ERP systems. So where you create a sales order item, and then what happens to that sales order, whether it goes into a block, whether it processes straight through to creating a delivery note or not, and then how it basically reaches the billing stage of the actual process. Now, what we see over here is the frequency of the cases. So if you remember, I initially mentioned we had actually tapped into 296,000 cases or orders for this particular customer. Now we see a distribution of those cases along multiple several paths in the organization. And that is something that process mining really helps organizations identify with regards to managing variants of processes as well. So if I just click on this icon over here, we can actually see a variant panel where we can see there are 793 different ways of carrying out this process. Now, in an ideal scenario, if you try to map out a happy path of a process, or if at a large scale you'd like to have this process to be standardized across the organization, the first, let's say, plan of action for the organization needs to be we need to minimize the variance in this process, because we need to ensure that a standardized version of this process is being carried out across all branches, all locations. So that is some sort of insight that can immediately be identified using process mining as well. And over here, if we collect or select multiple variants, we can see how they pan out on the process explorer screens as well. Um, Similarly, for business users who may not be process experts, may not be process mining experts, but they'd like to understand what's going on in the data behind this process. How is this process really working out? We do have, of course, indicative elements as well, where a business user can understand what the colors mean on the screen. Um, we can see the frequency of the activities, whether it's a start activity or an end activity in any of the variants in this process, and what is the frequency percentage of this activity within the whole data set. Because you may have some activities that occur less frequently as compared to the more common activities of the process. Similarly, the same views can be applied more from a throughput measure time perspective as well. So I've changed the measure over here to throughput time, where we can now actually see how long each let's say each activity takes from a throughput time perspective. So on average, what is the waiting time between activities? Or if you have the data ready for it, you can even see the average processing time on the activity level. And we can see that over here as well. So this is how we basically see the discovered process in ARIS process mining. Um, and then the second most important element is actually understanding how this process compares to what you may have designed or documented within your BPM repository. And for that, of course, we have a capability called process overlay, which actually helps organizations compare this discovered process data and overlay it on top of your BPMN diagrams or any other modeling notations that you may be using in ARIS. Um, so if we just want to get some insights into that, we can actually select multiple variants over here, and we'll actually be able to see um, all the blue highlighted parts are actually activities that have been rolled out, published as process knowledge within the organization, and all the red highlighted parts are actually activities or parts and variants which are being discovered from the systems, but they haven't actually been implemented as a part of the documented process in the organization. This could mean several things. This could first and foremost lead to a lack of knowledge with regards to your business stakeholders who are actual actors in the process. An exception occurs, there's an extra activity that needs to take place. If that activity is critical to the process and it's not documented, more often than not, um, let's say in this use case, if setting a credit block is not really a part of the documented process, but it occurs frequently, um, your stakeholders will then need to start shooting out emails, calling up the relevant stakeholders and understand how can they release this credit block, right? And that can lead to incurring more time and cost for that process. But if, let's say, through process mining, you discover that, yes, it's a frequently occurring activity, it's something that does actually happen, and it's something that we need to take into account for this process, you can start rolling out a new version of this process, which includes this activity and the work instructions around how you need to deal with this exception. And that can help increase or improve the efficiency of the actors working in this process as well. Um, and that is pretty much how you can check how well your process actually complies with what is originally designed. And we also come up with some sort of analysis around the conformance of this process, right? So we've seen it more from a visual perspective. But if we switch to the compliance view, we can actually see how many conformance issues we have. Is there an invalid end activity that's being picked up from the data? Is it an invalid start activity that is being picked up? So now that we've, sort of taken a visual look into how the discovered process looks on top of, the documented process, let's also understand some analysis behind the conformance of this process. So what really happens when we have a lot of activities that are being discovered from the process, but they're not a part of the originally documented or rolled out process in the organization. So let's go towards the process compliance. Over here, we basically get an overview of how many non-conformant cases we have. So if there's been any discrepancy as compared to what was originally designed and rolled out, or how the business stakeholders perceive the process to be, um, the case would basically get flagged as a non-conformant case in process mining. And then we get an overview of how many conformance issues we have, and how these conformance issues in the process potentially end up impacting the throughput time or the number of activities that you carry out per case as well. And of course, this is done again looking at the variants that we saw earlier. So if you have a variant that does not comply with the designed version of the process, you can see process mining knows how long that variant is taking, where the bottlenecks are in that variant, and then it can define the average throughput time impact for that particular conformance issue. So these conformance issues can also be categorized, where these could be invalid end activities, invalid start activities, perhaps unwanted activities as well. Again, these are categories that are defined based on the the process experts and the department heads within the organization as well, right? So, for example, this organization did not want to include ending a process at setting a credit block, which makes sense as well. If a credit block has been set, the order should not end or get rejected over there. We want to overcome that in the best case scenario for an organization to actually accept those orders, right? Overcome those issues and ensure we can unlock that revenue for the organization. So that gets flagged as a conformance issue because we want to eliminate any variance where the credit block gets set and the process ends over there. So this is pretty much how the analysis could look like for from a conformance perspective. Um, and that's pretty much all from a demo perspective for this order management use case. Again, it all depends on the core KPIs that the organization wants to measure, how the process analysis can sort of link us to those KPIs using process mining. And
Perfect.
that's all from my side from a demo perspective. Yeah.
Perfect, Shoaib. Presentation and a concept building session. Um, what we understood, though your journey started with the measurement, right? You started with the dashboard, Shoaib. Um, I'm just thinking about my discussions with few of my stakeholders and few of my clients who have a lot of challenges in terms of having the right data in place, right system data in place. Do you think process mining can help those companies as well where they do not have end to end process data available?
Sure. So there's a couple of elements that can actually be taken into consideration here. Um, First and foremost, every time we speak to an organization regarding process mining, the first message is in today's day and age, you will have some critical processes at least which are running on systems. Every organization today or most have an ERP, CRM, and a workflow management or an integration hub in place, right? Where processes are being automated or orchestrated. So keeping that in mind, we flag data readiness as a very critical element of selecting the right process candidate to ensure their process mining efforts don't really go to waste. At the same time, if let's say there are processes where there are gaps in the execution, right? There are some manual tasks happening completely offline or even out of systems. There are still legacy organizations which are using paperwork, for example, in their processes. Process mining is a good starting point to identify those gaps, to identify how certain steps of the process can actually be automated. So, process mining in a lot of organizations today is being used to identify the automation potential. How we do that is, of course, we understand the number of users involved, how much having those users work manually on these processes can cost, and the repetition of those activities, the missing gaps within the process, right? And based on that, if it's a highly repetitive task, it can be automated. It can be automated using RPA as well. And with that topic, I'd just like to highlight another practice that's becoming more and more common, where in a lot of systems, or in a lot of processes rather, there are activities or tasks that happen outside of systems, but they're still happening on desktop applications, Excel, Outlook, a lot of email communication and processes as well. That is where process mining can sort of move to the next level of task mining. And we actually provide those capabilities as well to organizations to ensure that they have complete end-to-end visibility. If there's a task that's not happening on your ERP or CRM or a common system, it's happening on a desktop application, you can leverage task mining to get that visibility also.
Wow, that's really a good perspective. So far, it's completely in contradiction to the thought that we have that process mining is only valid if you have a complete digital transformation available in your organization. What I'm understanding from you, Shoaib, the business cases that you're talking about, even process mining is helping an organization to plan their digital transformation. That's really very interesting thought, and definitely would like to discuss more on this topic with you. But I know for today's session we have a very limited time, and I have a lot of questions that I want to discuss with you. There's something one more important question which is asked by multiple stakeholders and the participants. Um, the KPIs are not very well defined in the organization, so they are facing a lot of challenge in defining the KPIs. What's your experience? Is there any standardized method of defining the KPIs? Do you have any experience, knowledge that or information that you can share with us?
Sure. So when it comes to understanding the right KPIs that need to be measured, I'd just like to circle back or give reference to a slide I showed earlier where we talked about the right value drivers, right? How a process or a use case in an organization can impact the strategic objectives of the organization, or the value drivers in an organization, how it impacts our financial cash flow, our PNL, our net promoter score, stuff like that. That is a very accurate approach to identifying and structuring the right KPIs. Because when you can start seeing that a KPI, sort of leads up to a strategic value driver in the organization, you understand as a stakeholder that yes, this is something that I can highlight to my higher management, to my shareholders, to my board of directors, and they will immediately connect with this because it's impacting the financial metrics of the organization, right? So that's a very important element of identifying the right KPIs. Yes, a lot of organizations are tracking several KPIs which may not even be relevant, and we actually help organizations streamline that aspect as well of process mining to ensure that whatever time and effort and cost they invest into a process mining practice, the value that they get out of that is something that's measurable and something that can be projected across the organization as well. And we work on specific use cases and calculations with organizations for that as well.
Excellent. In fact, generating a revenue, generating is an ROI of your process management effort is one of the very critical aspect for any organization. I mean, I have been into multiple discussion where they asked about what is the contribution of process management in my organization. We are investing a lot on the processes, but what is the contribution? I think process mining is one of the fantastic platform or a solution which help an organization to determine what is the value that you are generating through the processes or what is the loss that you are going to get if you are not following the processes in place. Great. So, last question, Shoaib, before we wind up. Now, business process management, we all understand, is a stream where it gives a complete power to the business users to manage the business, right? And process mining, as I understood, is in one of the stream of the business process management. So, who are the right stakeholders who should drive the process mining in the organization? Should it be driven from the IT side? Should it be driven from the team who is taking care of artificial intelligence or digital transformation in the organization? Or it should be driven from the operations team? What's your experience on this?
So That's a $1 million question actually, because that's the most common challenge that a lot of organizations face when they're trying to, embark on a process intelligence journey. Because the most common misconception is if the term process is involved, if it's anything BPM related, it's going to be owned and run by the Center of Excellence if there is one, or maybe one of the departments who've sort of come up with the initiative, right? Like you mentioned, it could be our digital transformation department or IT or something along those lines. But what's most critical in process mining is the collaboration of the relevant stakeholders. So, yes, your BPM Center of Excellence can be a catalyst in the whole practice. They could be responsible for ensuring all the relevant stakeholders are on board. But for example, we saw order management today. Another very common use case is, for example, procurement, purchase to pay processes, right? When we want to understand the right metrics or KPIs that need to be measured, or what are the nitty-gritty details of the processes, you need to ensure that the unit heads or the department heads from these areas are also involved in your practice, along with the system owners who are responsible for the data, because your process mining analysis is only as good as the data you feed into it, right? So you need to have that synergy between these departments where you have the process experts who understand process management and process analysis, but you need the department heads who have the subject knowledge, who know what the potential pain points could be, who understand the process, and they know which systems they're using. And with those systems, you need those system owners from IT who can give you access to the data. So these are, let's say, the most relevant or important stakeholders to ensure you get success from your process mining initiative.
I think what you're saying is very valuable, and when I'm connecting it with your previous answer of KPI definition, I think it makes a lot of sense to have this power and this knowledge and this ownership with the department or the cross-functional head, the value chain head as we call them, because they are the people who understand what are the important critical KPIs to measure the effectiveness of the entire value chain. So more they hold it, the better it will be for the organization to deliver the right value. Excellent.
Exactly. Precisely.
Shoaib, I think the time is limited, but nevertheless, I would like to definitely continue our discussion with you. I have few more thoughts and few more business cases that I want to discuss with you. We'll discuss and we'll plan another session where we can discuss more in detail about the process mining. Today's session, you have given a fantastic fundamental concepts and the base for all of us to start thinking about what next. So, great.
Perfect.
Thank you so much,
It's been a
Shoaib. Thank you
pleasure.
so much for
Thank
your
you for
time.
having me. My pleasure. My pleasure. I hope it was a beneficial session for everyone. And thank you so much for giving me the time to go through the topic. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Perfect. See you soon again, Shoaib. Thank you.
Definitely. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.